Here comes Bill Belichick back to Atlanta for the second time, reportedly. And Peter, what struck me as more significant than the news yesterday, and I think it first came from Ian Rappaport of NFL Media, that Bill Belichick would interview a second time with the Falcons, it's that the first meeting was one-on-one, Hall & Oates. One-on-one, I want to play that game tonight. If we're going to quote lyrics, let's keep it going. So, Arthur Blank and Bill Belichick together alone. That's significant to me because, Peter, I think one of the big impediments in Atlanta, and we may have talked about this last week, Rich McKay. Bill Belichick isn't going to want Rich McKay messing around with football operations. And Rich McKay has managed to survive in that organization for like 20 years now. Different roles, different titles, different duties. The right-hand man for Arthur Blank. He was sitting there with him at the press conference last Monday after they fired Arthur Smith. Terry Fontenot nowhere to be seen. There's Rich McKay with Arthur Blank. The fact that Rich McKay wasn't in the room, reportedly, if accurate, with Arthur Blank and Bill Belichick says a lot. And it tells me that Belichick went in there and told Arthur Blank, this is what's going to take if you want to hire me. And the fact that a second interview is happening implies that Arthur Blank is fine with whatever terms Bill Belichick outlined in that one-on-one meeting.
You know, I understand, and I've heard that for some reason there may be friction between Belichick and McKay. It could be because over the years, Rich McKay has been a very powerful member of the competition committee. Bill Belichick, it wouldn't matter if George Halas ran the competition committee. Bill Belichick has had some problems with things the competition committee has proposed over the years. Maybe that's it. I have no idea. But I do think that Rich McKay, from my understanding of how this organization has worked, has had very little authority over the football side of the building in the last, say 3 years, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. And he's been moved to much more of a business side job in the organization. Now, as to why Terry Fontenot was not sitting there with Arthur Blank, I thought that was odd, to put it mildly. I think you would want one of your football people up there, and I don't know why that was. I didn't think it was the right tone to not have Terry Fontenot up there. And so, we'll see what happens. But I would be surprised because, look, Mike, I shouldn't say really surprised, a little surprised. I would really be curious. The one thing above all other things, if I was sitting down with Arthur Blank and anybody with that organization, I would say, we don't have a quarterback. What are we going to do about that? Are we going to go throw $100 million over 2 years at Kirk Cousins? Are we going to move heaven and earth to trade up in the draft from number 8 to try to get the first, second, or third best quarterback? And what are our plans at quarterback? Because honestly, Mike, when you think about it, he needs to coach minimum 2 years to break Don Shula's record. And Bill can say whatever he wants. I'm not coming back to break Shula's record. I'm about building this team. I'm this, I'm that. And he really isn't consciously, quote, chasing Shula's record. But you've got to be totally naive. This is a guy who is the most history-aware coach I have ever met covering the NFL. In fact, he gave it to the Naval Academy, but Bill Belichick, 20 years ago, owned the largest football library in the world. The largest library of football books. I saw the library 20 years ago at his home in suburban Boston. It was huge. It was massive. All these football books, everything you could imagine, going way back. And then he ended up giving it to the Naval Academy. But I think the one thing to keep in mind about all this is that Belichick, I'm sure, has addressed the most important issues as he sees them with the Falcons. And my biggest question for Arthur Blank and for the Falcons is, what are you going to do about personnel? And if you hand the keys to the draft to Bill Belichick, you are making a terrible mistake. All you got to do is look at his recent drafts. Look at his recent first-rounders. His recent first-rounders are so abominable. You just, time and time again, you look at him year after year, his first-rounders over like the last 10 drafts have either been abject failures or very marginal players. I'd say with the exception of Christian Barmore. But the bottom line in all this is there's probably a deal to be made here, but I think each side has to go in with its eyes open.
Well, and the fact that, and again, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. There's always stuff going on behind the scenes, though. If there is interest elsewhere in Bill Belichick, that could get Arthur Blank to make commitments by way of power or whatever to let him do whatever he wants in order to get him. Because even with the flaws, the quality of the coaching on game day, the preparation, the detail, the ability to craft X's and O's unlike anyone who's ever coached in the NFL, that may be enough for Arthur Blank to say, here are the keys, do whatever you want. Just go out there and do the things that you did in New England. Of course, it starts with a quarterback. And you've mentioned a couple of times Kirk Cousins as a possible candidate to join Bill Belichick. And you got to be, ready to deal with Bill Belichick if you're a quarterback, because he can be a little rough around the edges. He can coach you a little hard. He'll call you out in front of the room when the players gather to start the season, to the dismay and surprise of people like Randy Moss and Chad Ochocinco in the past. Here's a recent quote from Kirk Cousins. He did a little media car wash apparently this week. I'm still waiting for our invitation for that, but that's another issue altogether. He told CBS Sports, of playing with Bill Belichick, I'm not going to turn down an opportunity to play for a future Hall of Fame coach. That's Kirk Cousins. So, the Falcons come calling, and Bill Belichick's the head coach. Looks like Kirk Cousins may be going to Atlanta, Peter.
I mean, we'll see, but I think Cousins' preference would be to stay in Minnesota. I think he likes it there. His family likes it there. He likes Kevin O'Connell. But I think if I'm Kirk Cousins, I'm not signing a one-year deal. I'm not coming back 1 year, $45 million. I want the assurance of a second year, as I'm not in any way in a prove-it mode. People might say, well, wait a second, he tore his Achilles. Come on. And again, I'm not saying it's impossible to tear your Achilles again. Of course it is. But it's also possible to tear your Achilles for the first time. So I don't think that should in any way stand in the way of anybody going after Kirk Cousins. And this year, Mike, I think Kirk Cousins has gone a long way toward dispelling, or at least, railing against the mode of thought that Kirk Cousins has a ceiling, and it's not a Super Bowl ceiling. I don't know what his ceiling is right now, but I thought early this year, until he got hurt, I was highly impressed with what he did with a team that was young and growing and, quite frankly, injured at one of its most important positions at times. So, to me, I think he'd be a great match with Belichick. And the last thing I would say is, remember how Belichick, Randy Moss, and Dante Stallworth told this story when they both got to the team in 2007. Remember how they're sitting in their first team meeting in a May minicamp, and Belichick sort of sets the stage. They're coming off a year where they lost in the playoffs, and Randy Moss and Dante Stallworth are sitting there, and they are shocked. Belichick is up there talking about Johnny Foxborough, denigrating Tom Brady, saying, you can't make a throw like this. And it was Belichick's way of telling everybody in the room, there are no sacred cows in this room. None. And Kirk Cousins, I believe, is absolutely, totally fine with that and will be fine with that and can be and wants to be coached hard. So I personally, Mike, if the Minnesota Vikings say to Kirk Cousins, hey, 1 year, 45, we're not willing to go longer. If I were him, absolutely unequivocally, I would go. And by the way, his wife is from Atlanta, and they spent a lot of every offseason in Atlanta with the grandparents of his children. So anyway, I don't know what that's worth. Just wanted to throw it in.
Well, and if I'm Kirk Cousins, I also want to see who the offensive coordinator is, because in the event it's Matt Patricia, that might be a factor in my final decision-making. And I say that half-jokingly.
It's not going to be Matt Patricia. Might be Josh McDaniels. Who wouldn't want to be coached by the guy? And look, everybody can laugh at Josh McDaniels, but, Tom Brady loved Josh McDaniels. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, and I was making kind of a joke, but the reality is there's a chance that Bill Belichick, after everything that happened in 2022, still wanted to bring Patricia back to be the offensive coordinator in 2023, despite the debacle that happened with the Patriots and Mac Jones. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.